Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dancing with Damage. I'm Ian, your resident philosopher.
And I'm Abby, your resident author.
And today, we talk about foreign policy, military intervention, all the stuff that's outside in, which it sort of makes sense. We thought it was catchy.
Yeah.
So, in the last episode, we talked a bit about the justice system.
Yes.
Abby and I really liked talking about that, so we took 2 episodes to talk about 1 chapter. So to be efficient, and for you, our friends at home, or wherever you are, I think we're probably going to try and get through chapters 41, 42, and, wait for it, 43 today. So that is a 3-chapter savings you're making today only.
In our defense.
Wow.
The chapters are sort of on the same topic, and in the book we split it up so we can give extreme detail, which we find is helpful because if you're making an argument, we want you to focus on what we're saying, not who is saying it or how they're saying it, just what is being said, which I think is an important life skill. Mm-hmm. And we felt in the book that because we had so many good ideas that we were able to, over months, write down in a coherent way, that it would be nice for people to read thoroughly our ideas. But we understand that just talking to each other, we're not so concise. We don't make as much sense. We say a lot of weird things. So we're trying to just sort of give you an overall understanding, sort of an aerial view, if you will, of chapters 41, 42, and 43 in The Social Blueprint.
The Social Blueprint. Yes, we are whistling the tune for you. But if you want to see the sheet music, you'll have to check Planthead over here.
Wow, I like that. That was good.
She likes it. I can stay. Phew. 1 more day. So let's remember, Social Blueprint fans, I always like to go back and tie it back to the inception of Damage because we're in Act 3. I've gotten that wrong a lot. We are in Act 3. Act 0 was an overview of Damage.
Oh no, you shouldn't list them all. It's going to go badly.
I won't. I just want to say that the puppet master in our theory, in our original theory, mind, the puppet master of the human behavior, Damage, that guilty system, lurking like the boogeyman in our subconscious and pulling the strings of our emotions, causing self-destructive behavior, antisocial behavior, leading to damaged social groups and damaged societies, leading to damaged social policy, damaged leadership which is not in the best interest of a nation. And it's 2026 right now. It is possible, I think, Abby, to conjure an example of leadership that history will probably not regard as acting in the best interest of a certain superpower.
Are we giving real life examples?
Yes.
Right now?
Yes.
Okay, to be very bold and at the same time not so bold. In the United States of America, there is some smattering of chaos at the moment where the president seems to find it good to be waging a war that he says isn't a war but might be a war on Iran to accomplish various goals which have not been very fleshed out in press conferences. And I think not only the fact that there is some conflict happening, it's exacerbated by the fact that the people don't really understand firmly the goal or the plan. And it seems as though any potential goals that might have been are not being realized based on what is currently happening in Iran. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's fair. And again, we're following the chapters of the book just to give them some color, just to give them some life. They have some life, but...
Literal plants.
Yeah.
Life.
They've already got life in the book. We think that's pretty snappy, but Abby and I are just trying to add some whiskers to the cat, if you will. And so we're not going to delve into any topical politics. That's just a good little mirror to hold up for ourselves just today, but we're not going to go into the looking glass now.
Okay, so fair assessment though?
I think it was very fair because, we wrote this book before what's going on right now in early 2026, and it just goes to show how the future of mankind is probably heading in the direction of countries getting involved with other countries in unhelpful and inappropriate ways. Now, remember the goal of the Social Blueprint and the goal of this philosophy, Abby, is, of course, to improve ourselves so that we as individuals can be fundamentally happy, because there are a lot of people out there watching this, I have no doubt, who, if they were critical and honest with themselves, could come to the conclusion they were not fundamentally happy with the direction of their lives, just as we are aware that if we don't do our best and try to make sacrifices for the next generation, we will also be fundamentally unhappy. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
And a corollary objective is to improve societies so that societies also can become healthy again and become better again. So in terms of chapter 41, this chapter is a bit about immigration. Now, we in Canada, Abby, refresh my memory, are we a country with a robust immigration population and inflow, or not so much?
Historically, we have been known as a cultural mosaic. And if you look at Canada, usually it's Indigenous Canadians who are truly Canadians born in Canada since the beginning of time. So everyone else who doesn't have Indigenous heritage comes from other places. So we are a very culturally rich country with hundreds of languages spoken and several religions practiced. Overall, we usually are very welcoming and accepting, promoting people coming to Canada because that is part of our Canadian identity.
Okay, so let me do some rapid fire questions at you, like a Western standoff. We're gonna try some questions with our, the firing line, as it were. You ready?
No.
She's ready.
No one prepared me for this.
No, that's true. No one did.
We don't come to talk to you with any plan, by the way. In case you were wondering, this is all just us talking. We sit down, we remember what the chapter is about, and we just talk. There is no script, there is no teleprompter, there is no planning. I don't know how he's going to talk about penguins. It's just a magical adventure. So what is this rapid fire questioning you have for me, Ian?
You are misleading our audience, Abby. I often don't know what was in the chapter we're talking about
I
because,
don't even know what act we're in.
because I have forgotten sometimes. I mean, there are 50 chapters.
Yeah.
I can't possibly remember all of that. And the reason I think written words were created by our species was because people like me and myself and others don't remember everything we say or think that we say or say that we think. What was I talking about?
You're going to ask me questions.
Oh, yeah. Put your dukes up, Abby. Question 1. Would you agree with me that you could compare the countries of the planet to houses in a neighborhood?
Yes.
And that would be like the boundaries of the country are like the walls of the house, and the people, the children that live in the house are like the population, and the parents of the house are like the leaders of the country.
So does that mean the grassy area between the houses is like the ocean?
Yeah, like international waters, if there is any. Some houses are very cheek and jowl. So some houses are
Attached.
right. So some are more like apartment buildings. If you're Europe, you got a big apartment building going on there. If you're Australia, it's like, whoa, nice lot.
It's a mansion in the middle of a field.
Uluru lives there. Uluru. So anyway, so you would agree with that. Good. Now, Abby, do neighbors in a community want the best for other houses in their community or the worst?
They should want the best.
Okay, they should want the best. Should they want the best for the most people in the household possible, or a very small amount of people in the household?
They should want all the people to prosper.
Okay. Now, let us say there is Canada is one house, 3 North America Drive. You like this.
I do.
You didn't think we had a mailing address, but we do.
It's like HOHOHO. When you send a letter to Santa Claus.
Yeah.
It's just cute.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, no, that's good. That's a good. HOHO. You need
Ho, ho, ho.
I know, but I think you need numbers. Uh-oh. Pause the tape. I think we might have a Darwin alert. You can't see him yet, but he is prowling.
He kind of wants a snuggle.
First, he came up to my lap. But as usual, everyone prefers hanging it with Abby.
He just wants to sit next to me.
All right, we'll see if he joins us. Okay, that's right. So we know the posts go to the house. Ho, ho, ho. Now, let us say that 3 North America Drive, Canada, is a nice house. It's a good house. And the kids in the house are doing fairly well. Parents in the house are doing fairly well. They got a pool. They're going to swimming in the pool.
They have a pool? I'm super jealous.
The meals are pretty good. Most of the kids are doing well in school. There's a few naughty kids, but you know, it is what it is. But down the street, there are some houses that are not doing so good. And those would be like developing nations in the world. Now, in those houses, developing nations, the parents are very cruel and they're abusive to the children. And the children are very sad. And the younger children especially are very sad because they are defenseless against the mean tyrants that are their parents. And some of the older kids have the power to protect their younger siblings, fight back against those tyrant parents. Now, what's been happening is those older children who have the ability to rebel against the parents look out the window and they see 3 North America Drive. They perceive it and say into themselves, my, they got a pool.
I was impressed too.
They got a pool. The parents are nice there.
And everyone seems well dressed and clean and fed.
3 North America Drive are waving from their window saying, hey, come over here, come over here. It's nice. And the older children of that other, let's say,
Sad Lane, 12.
5 Sad Lane, 12. It is sad because it's got 2 numbers. 12 Sad Lane say, yeah, let's go. They climb out a window and they come over to Canada. I mean, they come over to 3 North America Drive. Now, it is good for them. But is there any way now that house, 12 Sad Lane, is ever going to get any better if the people who can help the situation are leaving all the time?
No, it's sort of a metaphor, but also just reality. When you have families nowadays that are very damaged and there is negative behavior and negative things done towards the children, often the older siblings will unfairly have to protect the younger siblings. But if the older siblings are removed from the situation, then both the older siblings and the younger siblings will, in a sense, feel the brunt of the cruelty of the parents. There will be no reprieve. There will be no breaking of the cycle, as it were.
That's right. And if you're able to see down the street and actually pack a bag, throw it over your shoulder and climb down the window in the dead of night, would you agree that that person is actually pretty capable and resilient and brave to do such a thing?
It's very brave, indeed.
So, in fact, you're saying that those people that are leaving 12 Sad Drive are actually the most capable in that household, aren't they?
They are the best chance in that household for the other vulnerable people in that house.
Okay, and we did say earlier that we wanted the most people to be happy in that household, not just the few who can escape. We said this already. And so that's essentially, I think, that's pretty well what I wanted to get at.
That's the chapter.
That's the chapter. And so, Abby, thank you for playing the firing line with me. Did you like that experience?
It was interesting, but I don't think you can see. I don't think the range is wide enough, but I have a cat curled up in my legs sort of behind me. So I'm pretty happy. This worked out well for me.
She's pretty happy. So what we're talking about here is developed countries such as Canada often get a lot of immigration. Canada for many years has had a high rate of immigration. It is tamping down a bit, but the concern is that other nations around the world, other houses, are in need of revolution. You see, if you look through history, you'll see that most countries had some growing pains. And just like a young person who goes from being a child to being an adult, they have to go through those growing pains of adolescence, which are quite painful. Abby, did you have growing pains as a younger person?
It was painful that I never grew. I'm about 5'2", so I still have them.
Oh.
My lack of growing pains.
Wait, you're 5'2". I just figured you never stood up during our marriage.
He's much taller than me. He's got about a foot on me, and sometimes I look up at him and it hurts my neck, and I wonder how. Just how.
Sometimes I have a foot on her. Right now I have a hand on her. Ha! I got you.
It's a really bad joke.
Yes, it is. I just thought of it. It occurred to me. So yes, a growing pain in a country. Great examples, of course, are the French Revolution. That's a commonly known one. French had a very deleterious and problematic monarchy. Revolution happened. The English monarchy happened. And the countries tended to trend towards democracy. The French Revolution is one that people often think of. And other revolutions in history that tended to improve the civil rights of a nation and trend them towards democracy, which we do ultimately want. The school of ruling style of democracy, I think, would be ideal. But what we're getting at here, friends, is that even though to open the doors wide to immigration is in principle a very good thing, and obviously very beneficial to those coming over from developing countries to a developed country, and certainly we're not implying that those who make their way over are
Negative.
In fact, my experience, and Abby, you can chime in, obviously, but my experience is, people who come over from developing countries to developed nations tend to be extremely hardworking, have lower unemployment rates than citizens of the country, and so forth. What do you say about that?
Absolutely. And it is very traumatizing if you're in a country that has so much unrest that you need to flee to save your family. And we hope the future of the world can equip people better to be able to stay and fight for their nation. Because if you ask people who come from another country as a refugee, often one of the first things they'll say to you is, I don't want to be here. I'm grateful to be here, but I would rather be at home. I would rather be in my country. But there's no system in place that allows the people of the nation to realize that they collectively are greater than the small few who are ruling to take over. And I don't remember if it was Iraq or Afghanistan, but I remember there were soldiers being interviewed who had spent a great deal of time in one or both of those wars. And then as soon as they left, all of their progress was just undone. And the people of the nation had said, we wish you'd never come at all because you gave us hope for a short time, but essentially you sort of became the fighters. But once you left, because you can't stay and fight another country's battle forever, it's unsustainable. As soon as they left, all of the progress was just washed away. And then the people of the nation were almost left in a worse position because they had the comfort and the safety of the other nations giving them resources and giving them weaponry. But as soon as that was taken away, all of a sudden they have no systems in place, they have no tools, they have no progress. So that really struck me that often nations in peril, unless a country is dealing with an ecological problem, which you can't fight. You can't stay and fight that. You can't fight nature. You can't win. But any other reason a country could be in peril, there is a chance that the people could do something and fight. And it sounds like, from my understanding and my experience, and the experiences of others who I've spoken to and read about and seen on the news, is that people would much prefer to be able to stay in their country and fight off a peril and be able to live and be proud of their country rather than feel like they have to escape or someone has to come and help them, because neither solution is a permanent solution and neither solution is perfect.
So in a nutshell, chapter 41 is the idea that it is better for developed nations to consider not tempting immigration from political unrest. Another word for that is brain drain of a nation, because usually you get the best and the brightest coming over from a developing nation, and that hamstrings the nation even further, in order to promote revolutions in the original country, and that will be for the benefit of the global community. Even though, again, it is painful and bloody, it is still the greater good when it comes to ultimately improving quality of life around the world and reducing suffering around the world. And unfortunately, sometimes life is like that. Sometimes, like the growing pains of a teenager, there has to be some suffering in order for long-term improvement. And that also goes back to the definition of love. A short-term sacrifice
For long-term gain.
for a long-term gain. So it all ties in.
And we do want all countries to be considered developed nations. It is possible for every country to have a footing in the world and to be prosperous in the sense that their people are clothed and housed and fed and have a sustainable fresh water source. These aren't untenable, unreasonable things. These are very possible, but we just have to get to a place where it is possible, because right now there's blockades, like damage.
Indeed. And as a last caveat, and Abby already touched on it, but we argue in the book that although generally political refugees shouldn't be enticed to developed countries for the reasons we've talked about, ecological refugees which we have mentioned before, we believe ought to be welcomed. And I also tend to agree that there are certain political upheavals that are so drastic that there's no chance for a rebellion or a revolution to actually improve things. So thinking about like very acute cases of refugees rather than immigration may be something for leaders in the time of these acts to look at exceptions for. But certainly ecological refugees, where a country is subject to mass flooding and tsunamis,
Earthquakes, tornadoes, fires,
droughts.
or Tuesday in BC.
Wow. I thought you were going to say or orangutans. I was like, whoa.
I would like to meet one of those guys. I hear they're cool.
Planet of the Apes. That would count, I think. Anyway, yeah, we foresee due to climate change that sort of being a massive issue in the future. And we've already talked about how ecological refugees could be best brought over to developed countries. But we're going to move on. Because Abby, you mentioned foreign military intervention. You talked about military people going into Iraq or Afghanistan.
I don't remember, unfortunately, if it was one or the other or if it was both from the interviews. I don't remember. I'm so sorry.
I wonder if the soldiers ever found out.
That I don't remember?
No, where they were. If everyone was confused.
It's my brain, not theirs.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was a general, even the reporters. Soldiers have moved into to Afghanistan or maybe Baghdad. We'll never know, and that's why Abby will not be sure. I'm not sure what she's referring to either. I mean, obviously those two conflicts happened, but Abby's right. And in the book, we talk about the concept of an immune system. That's something we can relate to. The story is a doctor.
I like this story.
She loves it. It's story time. Abby, you be the patient. No,
Okay.
you be the doctor. Dr. Abby in the house.
It doesn't look good for the doctor, so I'll prepare to feel shame.
Tee hee hee. Wait till you see what the patient does. That's me. Cough, cough. I have a sickness of my throat, doctor. What can you give to me?
Immediately antibiotics. Take them.
So much in broad spectrum.
Yes, take all of them.
Gobble, gobble, gobble.
A year later.
A year later. Or some months. Yeah, I don't know exactly.
Sometime later.
Sometime later.
Who is it?
It's me.
Oh, yes, you. I know you.
It's the patient. And my throat is worse than before. What do you got for me?
I like how either I have so few patients that obviously it's you, or you're just trying to confuse me.
It's the opposite of house calls. Sometimes a doctor will visit the house of a patient. This patient goes to the house of the doctor.
Yeah, you're the one that I called the police on, so I do know it's you. It's like I'm checking the restraining order. Has it expired?
Wow.
I'm kidding.
Wow. This marriage. Ooh. Yeah.
As a doctor, obviously my first course of action is to immediately give you more antibiotics.
Hooray, more. I hope I don't get a resistant strain of my infection. Gobble, gobble, gobble. Some time has passed and I have developed a resistant strain of the issue because of all the antibiotics you gave me.
Here's more antibiotics.
They do nothing. I perish. Blah.
In medicine, in short, what can happen is they say to take the entire course of antibiotics, or your body can become resistant to that type of antibiotic because the bacteria is not fully destroyed. That's why you have to take the course over a certain amount of time. And if you don't take it for that long, then it won't work next time you try it. But even if you do take the full course of antibiotics and it is successful and it doesn't create a resistance within yourself to that issue, bacteria over time adapt because they multiply so quickly that when we use antibiotics regularly in society, it gives bacteria so many chances to evolve and adapt and mutate to be completely unaffected by any antibiotics we do have. So even if you do take the full course and you follow the doctor's recommendations all the time, every time we use antibiotics when it's not necessary, we're putting society at risk of having a new superbug that we cannot fight, which is much more dangerous than possibly what we were trying to use the antibiotics to destroy in the first place.
If you talk to doctors, they try to steer you away from antibiotics as the first line of defense because of exactly what Abby said, that it is better for an immune system to be able to fight an infection and gain antibodies that way than it is for, outside drugs to be thrown at the problem. And that reminds us a lot of what Abby said about foreign military intervention. And it ties back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, which is right now in the world, in 2026, there are nations, in particular one nation, that is sending military forces and assets to cause damage to a particular nation. And what we're going to see, most likely, if the analogy holds true, is just like what Abby said. We're going to see not a true improvement in the country's immune system. In other words, we were talking earlier about, Abby, different households.
Yeah.
And how some children get bold enough to fight back against those tyrant parents.
Yeah.
Now, that would be like the antibodies of an immune system. Mm-hmm. So what we're saying is foreign military intervention should be discouraged in our philosophy because it is like prescribing antibiotics for an issue, and it won't develop the immune system of a country. And this will create a weakness in that country so that it is more prone to stay underdeveloped and not fight back against the infection.
It's especially true nowadays to be a little bold and refer a little bit back to the example we boldly talked about earlier. I don't know if it's controversial to talk about because everyone's talking about it, but we're trying to stay relatively impartial so we can focus on the message as opposed to political views.
At least for the first 50 chapters. But after that, the gloves come off.
But I find in modern society, when you intervene in a foreign nation, nowadays with the technology we have, it becomes less clear if those actions are taking place for the aid of another country or for personal selfish gain of the country helping. It becomes very unclear. There's a lot of question marks, and the type of intervention that we've created, even if the country helping is altruistic in nature, there is no evidence that the help they can provide will actually be helpful. There is a very big difference between going and providing food resources to help people who are in peril and trying to fight the battle on behalf of the people. And I'll just say that. That is what I will say.
What I will say is I was trying to start the fire earlier today. And first, I took some newspaper and I lit it with a lighter and I put it against the wood that was in the fireplace. And it flared up brightly with a great flame, but died down after a few moments, and the wood in the fire hadn't ignited.
No.
Then I saw there were some embers beneath the wood, and I blew on them from afar. And I blew and blew, and the embers were able to ignite the wood above them. And so you see,
that is how we start a fire.
But it's also how you can help other nations around the world, not by an intense, short, superficial flash, like foreign military intervention, like sending in foreign troops to stomp around, cause a big ruckus, and leave, but rather with the power of ideas, which is like blowing, which are invisible. The air that you blow is invisible and actually doesn't touch the fire. And ideas from other nations are also invisible. But through the communications technology, which is a helpful technology in this sense, other nations will be able to ignite the fires of revolution by looking at the examples of other countries because of things like the internet. And that is a better way to create change in a country, by being the example you want to set for other countries. And I like this. This is one thing I learned in law school. I didn't remember that much, but I did learn this. We learned that Canada's constitution is one of the most mimicked and replicated constitutions for nations who are developing.
That's wonderful. I like our Constitution.
It's a great constitution. The Constitution is a good constitution. So the point is, Abby and I aren't saying, ignore other countries, let them just
Suffer.
suffer. We're saying
Change up the strategy.
Yeah, it's better to be a role model, even though it's harder. If you have a class, Abby, and you have some kids acting out, you said earlier that it might be good to do what?
I said a lot of things.
I think you said pair up that troubled child with a more stable child.
That was one of the things I said. Yeah. And this isn't to say we're against foreign military aid in the sense of food and water and building materials or things that the people in the nation would need to prosper if they're cut off from them. because it makes sense that if there is conflict in your country, the regular supply chains would be disrupted. I think it's wonderful to send aid in that sense to other countries and give them resources to use, like the wind Ian talked about earlier, the extra food to nourish.
It blows the hair.
To nourish those in the country.
See how I've affected her?
So affected. But it's important to remember that we...
Try and focus now.
Please stop. It's important to remember that we don't live the lives of people in other nations. We have different political systems. We often have different religions, beliefs, day-to-day lives, different climates, different cultures, different norms. And you can't go into somebody else's home and say, I'm going to solve your problem, and then tell you what you need to do, because it might not work for them.
Well, I think of the mighty penguin. You can imagine if someone went down to the South Pole and talked to a penguin, and the human says to the penguin, Penguin, I see that you sit there for 6 months while your mate goes and gets fish. I don't know if it's 6 months, but you sit for a long time while your mate goes and gets fish, and you just have to sit there and shiver on the ice with that egg on your feet. That you don't like that, do you? And the penguin says, it's not the best, but that's my lot. And the human says, well, I have a better idea. You should balance the egg on your head and speed skate around to try and catch some fish of your own, and that will be best for you. And the penguin does that, and the egg breaks.
That's so sad.
And in fact, the speed skates give it blisters because it only has flippers and cannot wear the human skates. Is that sort of what you're talking about?
Essentially, if you don't live somebody else's life, you cannot tell somebody how best to solve a problem. It is like our previous conversation about specifically teaching. I'll take teaching.
Okay.
How they implemented the rule that you can't fail anybody anymore, essentially, in Ontario. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to fail anyone. I was not allowed to fail a grade 9 or a grade 11 student. I never met and didn't do any work in my classes. Literally zero. I had to pass them with a 60. And if they would have asked me or allowed me to do what I thought was best for my class and the well-being of my students, I would have said, well, we should recommend they take the class again, or we should give them supports, or we should make them, on a longer time span, complete different work to prove they deserve to pass. Unless you're in that situation yourself, unless you have the lived experience, you don't know what's best for somebody else. The government didn't understand what was best for teachers and students because they never experienced the classroom setting as it is today. So it would be very bold to go into another country and say, we know what's best for you and how you should function, when we don't have your lived experience. So it's also important to have that autonomy.
Indeed. But wait, there's more. So Abby was saying how foreign aid is superior, and it made me thinking of the doctor, instead of giving antibiotics, giving some chicken soup.
Yeah, or say rest, because obviously there's a time and a place for antibiotics in sickness. As you said, there's a time and a place where there's some political upheavals that are so extreme, it would require, there's no way that the people could have the resources, time, or ability to attack back. And along with ecological refugees, if there is a natural disaster, there is no force humans have that can combat a tsunami or a wildfire or a series of tornadoes or hurricanes. It's just not possible. So in those cases, that would be like applying the antibiotics to the extreme illnesses that don't respond to other treatments.
So yeah, foreign aid, not foreign blades.
I was going to say a foreign raid.
Ooh.
Like that?
That is nice.
If we're not planning to have a military whose purpose is to go out and try to smite stuff, then what should the military look like? And essentially, Chapter 43 says that we should move from an offensive military to a defensive military. And I also like this fable. I think I like all of them. About two brothers who quarreled over a sword and a shield. Ian, would you like to share this story for our friends?
Yes, two brothers in the book, and they are fighting over some land. Mm-hmm. Because a river splits their land, and they're arguing about who owns the river. And so one older brother challenges the younger brother to a duel.
Hate when that happens.
Gotta hate that. You look at your Monday schedule and it's like, fix the fence, feed the pigs, duel your brother to the death. Christmas. Well, the good news is if you lose, you don't have to look at Tuesday's schedule. But anyway, so the two brothers meet on the field of combat and they choose their weapon of choice. older brother goes to the weapons rack and picks out a very sharp sword. And the younger brother goes and picks a shield. That's his weapon. And everyone in the stands, because I don't know, tickets were sold. Look,
I feel like you'd watch a duel. I feel like if there was a duel happening, you'd be pretty interested in that.
they set up the stands. There were people watching. Anyway, so everyone laughed. Ha ha ha. He has taken a shield. How silly. Actually, you know what's funny? Isn't that the same thing that happens in that movie, How to Train Your Dragon?
With Hiccup?
Yeah. Doesn't that character pick up a shield at one point? Oh, and a dagger or something.
They all have swords and shields.
Okay, so never mind about that.
But he uses the shield as a weapon.
Does he? Okay, well, forget about that for a second. Forget about that. Because, have you forgotten about it yet? You must. Anyway, so the two brothers, they meet, and the older brother is a very skilled swordsman. So he hacks and slashes, but the younger brother is an equally, if not superior, defender, is able to block all the blows. And an hour goes by, 2 hours goes by, and finally the older brother collapses from exhaustion. Black.
He's alive.
Yeah, he's fine. He's unhurt, but he's too tired to continue because he's been swinging around his heavy sword. And the younger brother essentially says, I didn't want to hurt you because you're my brother, but I have bested you because it's more difficult to, and more honorable to defend as I have than attack as you have. And everyone in the stand was like, oh, snap. That's just how they are in medieval times. They're gangsters. So anyway, we argue in the Social Blueprint, encapsulated by that fable, that we've talked about our peace officers and trying to move to more hovering aircraft type emergency vehicles. Our thinking process is it wouldn't be interesting to have a more militia-based military, which would be more cost effective and more defensively oriented, using the concept of peace officers and hovering aircraft like helicopters to be fitted with certain defensive weaponry that would be a very good swarming defense. Because you can imagine if every town in the nation had 30 helicopters or something like that, and there was an invasion, and then all the cities sent their aircraft kind of thing. And this wouldn't work for every country and in every situation, but this is sort of spitballing ideas to be financially responsible with a sort of dovetailing different ideas together. Wouldn't it be interesting if you had 300 or 1,000 hovering, skimming aircraft that had very good defensive capabilities, and you can get different armaments that deal with all kinds of threats. And then your peace officers would be trained to use that sort of thing. So a militia style, but sort of a professional militia. And that's been used successfully historically, and I think we argue that in the book as a way to keep national security and confidence in sovereignty with a shield, like the brother, but move away from the damaged practice of the sword, like the older brother.
We want to live in a time of peace, but we can't live in a time of peace if, like in the Cold War, if everyone is threatening to destroy each other and there's fear of everyone destroying each other. So hopefully by this point, decades in the future, people have reduced their damage enough to be able to say the point of a military is supposed to be defending the country. This isn't England in the 1700s. We're not going and snatching land up because we feel like it.
Yeah.
We're not. So the idea would be you have the capability to defend from any weapon or threat that may exist in the world. But the goal is to practice what you preach and to show the world we are trying to be peaceful. We will defend if you attack us, and we will be stronger. But we don't intend to invade you. There is no threat from us. We are peaceful. We hope that we can have peace between our nations because that is the goal. It would sort of be like saying, I want to be so unbelievably healthy. And then every day you go and buy an entire cheesecake and you live by yourself. If you're extremely healthy, A, are you eating cheesecake every single day? And B, if you're not eating the cheesecake, is it fiscally responsible to be buying an expensive cheesecake every single day? Is that a healthy habit? There is no way to escape that situation while being healthy unless you stop the habit of buying cheesecake every single day. So we have to practice what we preach, and we have to become more defensive nations and stop posing active threats to other nations.
As the mighty hedgehog, and not that superfluous falcon that strikes, but rather like the gentle hedgehog, which lives its life in security and spiny essence. Do you like that?
I really like hedgehogs. What are you channeling? What was that voice?
I have no idea. But as a final closing note, even if a hedgehog can protect itself, we don't really touch on this in the book, but I think Abby and I sort of recognize that we've argued against avoiding foreign military intervention in, for example, a civil war, civil unrest, if the point in time happens where one nation is attacking another nation in a sort of imbalanced way. I'm sure there would be a reason in the future as these acts progress that the hedgehogs may have to band together to assist a fellow hedgehog. And that sort of reminds me of buffalo. So let's say there are wolves hunting a buffalo. Mean old wolves. The buffaloes will form a circle
Around the weakest buffalo.
around the weakest and defend it. And so I think perhaps there would be cause for nations at times to be like the buffaloes. Although hopefully if damage is reduced throughout the world, which is the goal and is possible, then there would have to be less circling of the buffalo, so to speak, against the wolves that would arise from time to time, which is just the way of human countries. The buffalo may slowly move around into the circle and it may be a little bit more cumbersome, but once it gets into place, the circle of the buffalo is quite mighty. And the wolf must turn away and renounce itself and become a baker and bake only pies. Delicious, delicious blueberry pies.
I know what I have to make tomorrow.
Delicious. Wolf pie.
No.
Blueberry pie.
So dark.
That's pretty dark. So anyway, thank you for tuning in. That was our sort of ramble about
3 chapters.
3 chapters. We talked about reducing immigration to developed countries unless it's based on an ecological distress or dire situation that revolution can't spring from. We talked about reducing foreign military intervention into nations that need to change their regime in order for the nation to change its own regime, which is like a better immune system for that nation, which will endure and not be short-lived and detrimental in the long run. And we talked about countries becoming like buffalo or like hedgehog or the brother with the shield in order to promote world peace ultimately, or more world peace than we see now, and decrease arms races and things like that. And we recognize that these are very idealistic views. People have been wanting these for a long time. We're not the first person to voice them. But remember, we're not suggesting that this generation attempt or dream about implementing these things right away. Instead, in the book, this is one of the later acts. I mean, we're in chapter 43 basically here, and that would be quite a few decades down the road, and unfortunately humanity will have to endure, in our view, until these acts are completed, because without addressing the underlying issue of damage, just like if we don't address the underlying issue of this cat, Abby will never get out of her chair. She will be forever trapped by the cat.
He wanted a hug. He told me.
Yes, you can probably see his paws. Anyway, that was a lot of fun, Abby. Thank you for hanging out with me and doing that chapter. And in the next episode, I think we are getting perilously close to Act 4, which is the banishment of damage.
That's very exciting, isn't it?
Be gone, damage.
If only it were that easy.
It is not. Or is it?
Tune in to find out.
Tune in next time.
Have a great day.